Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome back for another math lesson. Today we're going to continue to explore even more about shapes, but today we're going to be introduced to something called solid figures, and that's going to be our 3D shapes. So let's jump right into our video to get into our lesson. Our words to know:
cube, sphere, cylinder, cone, rectangular prism.
Right.
These are solid figures. Let's say the name of the two solid figures: cube, rectangular prism.
All right, let's repeat that real quick. We have cube, repeat that. And this one here is called a rectangular prism. Can you repeat that? Rectangular prism.
How can you describe the solid figures? They both have flat parts and corners. The flat parts of the cube look like squares. The flat parts of the rectangular prism look like rectangles and squares.
So with solid figures, they're 3D. So meaning I can flip and turn them in all different directions and show you exactly what it looks like. So let's take a look at what we have here. We have a rectangular prism, and as they said, it's made up of not just rectangles, but if I turn it to this way, if I turn it on its side, rather, it is made up of squares as well. So it's made up of both rectangles and squares, whereas the cube is a bit different, and it's made up of only squares.
What are some objects that have the same shape as cubes and rectangular prisms?
So I hope at home you are trying to come up with your own examples. Pause the video if you need a minute to think, but let's jump into the examples they give.
Some objects are boxes, cartons, drawers, and file cabinets.
So all of our 3D shapes are shapes that you see in your everyday life. So I want you to think about the objects that you have at home that are like these 3D shapes.
Can you tell me the name of this solid figure?
All right, so looking at this solid figure here, you might have seen this before. If you know the name, I want you to shout it out now.
It is a sphere.
Say that with me, sphere.
How is the sphere different from the cube?
So they definitely don't look the same. Let's see how they're different.
The sphere does not have any flat parts and no corners.
It's rounded on all sides.
What are some objects that have the same shape as the sphere?
So think about a sphere and come up with some of your own examples of what looks like this object. I'm sure you can come up with a few. Pause the video if you need a minute to think.
A baseball and an orange have the same shape as the sphere.
These are just two of many examples.
What is the name of this solid figure?
All right. Not sure if you guys ever seen something like this before, but this is our next solid figure. If you know the name, I want you to call it out.
It is a cylinder.
Say that with me, cylinder.
How can you describe a cylinder? It has flat parts and curves. What other objects are this shape?
Think about something else that could be in your home that might have this same shape.
A can of soup and a pencil have the shape of a cylinder. Can you name this solid figure?
And our last solid figure that we're going to be introduced to, something that looks like this.
It is a cone.
So depending on how you hold it.
How can you describe a cone?
Think about how we could describe what this looks like, showing you on all sides of what it looks like.
It has curved sides and one flat face. What are some things you know that have this shape?
I'm sure if I turn it this way, you can already start thinking of what it might be.
An ice cream cone and a party hat have the same shape as a cone. Now you know what solid figures are, and you can look for them in the classroom, in the environment, and at home.
And that is something I do challenge you to do, where our whole world is filled with solid figures. So I want you to look around your home and try and come up with some more examples and share them with your parents, your siblings, or you can share them with me on Class Dojo. All right, let's go into our presentation to talk a little bit more about solid shapes. So a solid figure is a figure that has a length, a width, and a height. And what that means is that it takes up space. It is a 3D shape. It's bulky and could take different forms, right? So we learned a bunch of different shapes, which you see there, but there's something that's solid. So the first one we learned about is a cube, which is made up of all squares on every side. We have our rectangular prism, which is made up of rectangles as well as squares. And turn it around so that you can get a better idea of what this looks like. The next one we were introduced to is a sphere, and a sphere is rounded on all sides. It looks like a ball. The next is the one that looks like a can of soup, right? So it's made up of some circles, right? Some flat surfaces that look like circles, but it's also curved so it can roll. And the last one we were introduced to is our cone, which has a flat surface here at the bottom. However, it is curved and can roll a bit and comes to a point at the top. All right, so let's look at our practice problems. It says to look at the solid figure and then circle the objects that have the same shape. So the first one's done for us, and it is our rectangular prism, which is made up of rectangles and squares. And I want you to look at those 4 objects: our glass of juice, our toolbox, a bowling ball, as well as a book. And only 2 of them have that same shape of a rectangular prism, and that is the toolbox as well as the book. Let's go into our second example. We have our sphere, which again, the sphere is round on all sides. So let's go through the pictures that we see there. The first one is a basketball. Does a basketball look like a sphere? Yes, it does. How about a pail? A pail, does that have that same shape as our rounded sphere on all sides to look like a ball? I don't think so. After that, we have an eraser. Does an eraser have that same shape rounded on all sides? No, it does not. And the last one is a tennis ball. Does a tennis ball look like a sphere and is rounded on all sides? Yes, it does. Let's go to number 3, which talks about a cylinder. So a cylinder, again, made up of some circles as well as the has curved edges so it can roll. Let's go through our pictures. Does an apple have this same shape of a cylinder? I don't think so. I think an apple is its own shape. How about the can of peaches that we see there? Does a can of peaches have the same shape as a cylinder? Yes, it does. Next one is a jar of peanut butter. Think about a jar of peanut butter if you have it at home. Does a jar of peanut butter look like a cylinder? I would say it looks fairly close to one, so I would count that. And the last one is a football. Does a football have that same shape of a cylinder? Well, not really, because it comes to 2 points at the end. Let's try a couple of more examples. Number 4 is a cube. So thinking about a cube, again, a cube has squares on all sides of it. The first picture that we see there is some type of present. Does a present look like a cube? Does it have that same shape? I would say it's pretty close, so I would count that. The next picture in that row is of a bike tire. Does a bike tire have that same shape? I don't think so. After that, we have something called a jacks. It's a game that you can play. Does that have that same shape of a cube of all squares? I don't think so. And the last is what looks to me like a block. Does a block have the same shape as a cube? Yes, it does. Next one. Number 5 is a cone. All right, so again, I'm looking for that flat rounded surface as well as coming to a point and rounded on its edges. So does a starfish hold that same shape as a cone? I don't think so. Let's go to the next one is an ice cream cone. Does that look like a cone? That one should be easy for us, right? If I just turn it this way, it certainly does, has the word cone in its name. The next one is something called a megaphone, and a megaphone is similar to like a microphone, boys and girls, where you can project your voice from it. Looking at its shape, though, does it have a similar shape to a cone? Now, again, with any shape, I want to be able to twist and turn it so that I can see how it looks in a bunch of different ways. So if I hold it like this, does it look like a cone? I think that it certainly does. And the last one there is the orange. Does an orange look like a cone? I don't think so. I think that looks more like a sphere. Now, the last one that I have here is a sphere. So a sphere, does the looking at the first picture, it looks like a tissue box to me. Does a tissue box have that same rounded, curved on all sides? I don't think so. I think a tissue box looks more like a rectangular prism. So that one's not going to work. How about a soccer ball? Is the soccer ball rounded on all sides? I think so. So that'll count. And the next one is a top, a game that you can play and twist. Does that have that same shape of a sphere? I don't think so. The last one is actually cut off, but that's okay. We'll just skip over it. Number 7, it says what comes next. So just like with shapes, where you can find a pattern with using our plane shapes, you can also do the same thing for our solid shapes. So a pattern, just as a reminder, boys and girls, is something that it repeats over and over and over again. So looking at the pattern that we have here, I have cone, cone, sphere, cone, cone, sphere, cone, cone, sphere. Take a minute to think what would come next in our pattern. Shout out your answer. I hope that you all said cone. And that is the end of our little video all about solid shapes. I hope that you found it helpful. There is an awesome BrainPop video to help us understand solid shapes even more, so head over to BrainPop Junior to check that out. And again, just as a reminder, make sure that you're completing workbook page for the workbook pages for 15.6. That's the lesson that we did today. So we're kind of hopping all over the place with this chapter. So please make sure the workbook pages go along with the solid shapes. That's it for today, boys and girls. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.